Good evening, boys. I hope you're good. I'm fine, but I haven't had much time to work on my game. So tonight, we're doing something a little bit different. Tonight, we're paying respects to a legendary GPU, a 12-year-old beast that somehow still works and can somewhat still hold its own. Gentlemen, give a warm welcome to the GTX 970, my first serious GPU in its original box too, with 12 years of service uninterrupted under its belt. The NVIDIA GTX 970 is a GPU with 4 gigs of GDDR5 VRAM, on paper at least, released in 2014, that was praised for its amazing price-to-performance value, initially at least. It is powered by the 28nm Maxwell architecture, and it can trade blows with the more expensive R9 290X while also consuming way less power. This consumed 148 watts, while the 290X consumed 290 watts. The praise lasted until people tried to exceed 3.5 gigabytes of VRAM usage, which would trigger some strange and unusual performance issues. Investigations into these slowdowns started, and people found out that while the card did indeed have 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, only 3.5 of those were accessible through the high bandwidth full-speed memory path. The remaining half a gigabyte was accessible only through a slower and narrower path, so it had much higher latency and it was much slower to access, which would trigger the slowdowns. Admittedly, at the time, very few games used more than 3.5 gigabytes of VRAM, but it did raise concerns on the viability of this card in the future games. Long story short, it was a PR fiasco, which led to various class action lawsuits against NVIDIA, because people were rightfully arguing that advertising this card as a 4 gigabyte card was misleading, since, only 3.5 gigabytes could actually be used effectively. In the end, the people won, and they got $30 refunds if they actually did buy the card and they could prove it. As for my personal experience with the card, I didn't know about any of this, and I only found out about all of this years later. Because I live in Italy, and at the time when I bought the card, I was 16, so I didn't know about the class action lawsuits, and I didn't know about the 3.5 gigabyte thing. The only thing I knew was that every game I ran on this thing ran great, and I only knew that I was happy with it, and I was happy in general. There were better times. After 12 years of heavy use in 4 different PCs owned by 3 different people, I'm repasting this card for the first time, and it shows, since I've never seen thermal paste so dry in my entire life. That wasn't even thermal paste anymore, it was thermal rock. I went through 12 cotton sticks and a bunch of toothpicks, but I did manage to get all of it off the cooling block in the end. As for the chip itself, I managed to clean the top of it, but I didn't feel like risking breaking the GPU by mining the thermal rock that formed at the sides. It shouldn't matter that much though. Now please, enjoy the rest of the time lapse. Now that I am done repasting the GPU, it's time to put it in my living room PC. The specs of this computer are not very impressive. It's a Ryzen 5 5600G with 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM. But it shouldn't bottleneck the GPU, since it's not very powerful to begin with. Also, it should be a nice upgrade, since before I was only using the integrated GPU inside the processor. After repasting, the temperatures of the GPU should be under control now, and it should not sound like a jet engine anymore. So now it's time for the benchmarks. Let's start strong with a benchmarking classic, Cyberpunk 2077. At 1080p minimum settings and FSR-free balanced, I wouldn't say it's running well. The GPU is constantly out of memory and also constantly dipping in the slow ½ GB of VRAM, no matter the settings, so it stutters a lot. You could play like this, but it wouldn't be a great experience. That said, it's not the worst I've experienced, and I could make do. Elden Ring at native 1080p low ran perfectly fine, and I'm not really surprised since it is not a very GPU intensive game. Also, I originally played the game with this exact GPU, so I already knew it would run well. Note that I'm in the most graphically intensive open world area of the game. It generally runs better in the dungeons. Not that it runs bad here, but just saying. Ghost of Tsushima at 1080p low settings with FSR-free balanced manages to stay around 50 FPS, which is not ideal, but it's not too bad. If I were to enable dynamic resolution scaling, it would actually stick to 60 FPS. So overall, it's not a terrible experience, even if it's a little blurry and lo-fi, I suppose. Now we have come to Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. This game ran surprisingly well at native 1080p with the lowest settings. The game managed to get around 60 FPS in the city area, which is really impressive, while it did struggle a bit in the forest area, which was expected because trees and grass are generally expensive to render. Since it is not exactly a fast-paced game, I would call this playable. Resident Evil Requiem. This one was surprising. At 1080p lowest settings and FSR-free balanced, the game could not manage to go above 18 FPS. The card just doesn't have enough VRAM. Also, this game came out after the driver support for the GTX 900 series ended, which was in October 2025 by the way, so that also might be a factor. Resident Evil 2 at 1080p maximum settings keeps a stable 60 FPS. No notes on this one, it's just perfect. It doesn't even max out the GPU, it's quite impressive actually. So if you wanna play Resident Evil game on this card, let it be this one or the remake of 3, they both run beautifully. The Witcher 3 Enhanced at 1080p low settings with dynamic resolution gets to around 60 FPS. I expected this one to run much better since it's a 2015 game, but the Enhanced Edition does things that the GTX 970 does not like, apparently. So yeah, stick to the old version of The Witcher 3 if you're using this card. Fallout 4. Man, this game brings me back. I'm even using the exact same GPU I used at the time. As for performance, it gets a perfect 60 FPS at 1080p Ultra without even maxing out in the GPU. Great experience, I would say. It's not really surprising since it's a 2015 game, but still great. And considering how The Witcher 3 fared, this is a good result. So, after all these benchmarks, can we say that this old beast still has some fight left in it? Personally, I would say so. After all, this GPU is comparable, like 20% slower, more or less, to the GPU inside the Xbox Series S, which is a current-gen console. It is the worst current-gen console, but it is a current-gen console nonetheless. Now, some games that require hardware RT, ray tracing, will not run at all on this GPU, since it does not support it, and some games that require a lot of VRAM will just run terribly on this GPU, because it has very little VRAM. It's also probably gonna get way worse in the coming years, since games are getting more VRAM hungry, and driver support is not existent for this GPU at this point, since it was dropped, as we said, in October 2025. But generally, I would say that if you adjust your expectations and settings accordingly, this GPU is still good enough for 90 to 95% of the games on Steam. So yeah, my GTX 970 has been restored to its former glory through repasting and has found a new permanent home in my living room PC. It's more of a retirement home, but at least it will be doing something instead of just sitting in the box gathering dust, like a sad old man. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment and subscribe if you want. And see you in a few weeks, I guess. So have a good summer and drink responsibly.